Hi, everybody. Okay, so welcome to the live ornament finishing question and answer. I love ornament finishing, and honestly, I don't think I necessarily expected to all the years ago that I tried it. And it's just become it's such a wonderful part of the needlepoint process, and I love teaching it. So this is just great. Okay, so first things first, since we're already into adding extra rows, Kathy, Vicky, and Kelly all asked pre-submitted questions on adding them. So how important are those few extra rows when finishing your round? And again, just to kind of reiterate, especially when it comes to special shape finishing, those extra rows do become really important. So I would say in a normal round or a square ornament, I'm usually not adding extra rows just because I don't want to take the time to do it. If those design elements do come right up to the edge, then it's a really great idea. Now, when it comes to special shape finishing, and there's actually a whole section of this in my my special shapes finishing online class, where we talk about adding those extra rows. And the reason for it is that a special shape a lot of times tends to be sort of a standalone object. So it doesn't have a background. And when it doesn't have a background, if you lose those extra two rows, you are really starting to lose sort of the design itself. And it's not as, once you finish it, it's not as clear. And so if you add two rows, it kind of gives it this really lovely outline all the way around. And if you wanted even more outline, then you could add, do 4 extra rows or 5 extra rows. But adding that becomes just really important as soon as you get into sort of special shapes finishing. In terms of round and square ornament finishing, I think that's really just more up to you. And if you have design elements that are close to the edge, if you don't like that, if you want to, the thing that always comes to mind is like the Kirk and Bradley travel rounds. They always have these tiny design elements really close to the edge. And once you finish that, and stretch that canvas around the board, you end up having almost those cute little elements butting right up against the cording. And to me, it just would look cuter if it was slightly spaced between the cord and those cute little elements, like you still saw some background, if that makes sense. So yeah, hopefully that answers your questions. Does anybody else have any questions regarding extra rows? I'm trying to think, do I have any great examples here too? The other thing that you really get into special shapes ornament finishing is adding a background, which is a little bit, it's kind of similar to adding extra rows. So when you have a sort of standalone design, now in our charts, we do specify the background typically, depending on the purpose of the design. And this is a chart that we did last Christmas. So we do tell you how much of a background to add, but sometimes the artist won't do that. They'll just give you the design itself so that you can decide what you want to make out of it. So an example of this is our monograms. Like, we don't tell you what kind of background to put in on our monograms, because you can turn that into an ornament. You can turn that into, a self-finishing box. You could turn it into a pillow. It's really designed to be flexible. And so then you need to put the background on yourself. And yeah, we do kind of go into that in this special shapes ornament fishing class. Is it possible to add too many extra rows? Sometimes I go overboard. Yeah, I've done this too. Where it gets a little bit tricky, it's not a horrible thing to do. But where it gets tricky is that when you cut your canvas, you want to make that cut, and you want to go, you want to leave 1 to 2 canvas threads in between. Sort of this black line would be the stitching line. So you want to leave 1 to 2 canvas threads between there, so that you're not cutting all the way up to your stitching. So I just finished, what did I finish? It was a piece and I had two, it was too big. And it's completely escaping me now, but um, I, the tabs fold down really beautifully when they're cut right up against the stitching, especially on a special shape. So when you can't take that cut all the way, you take it up to the stitching, but the stitching really isn't the edge of your needlepoint, then you're getting bulk and it just doesn't go around quite as nicely, and you kind of got to glue it down and you got to pull it more. And so it can make it just a little bit trickier maybe to get that canvas smoothly around, but I would say that as long as you're not like, I don't know, you're not pulling around, 5 rows of stitching, then you're probably okay. Yeah, any other questions about that? So how do you get your cording extra tight? This is a question from Kathy. Kathy's in my class. So what I really like to do, as I'm going to show you here, is I really like using the Crynet Custom Cording Maker. You can use like a pencil or a pen, and I show you that in my free video on YouTube. But this little guy makes making cording so much easier. Very, very worth it. These are about $20, depending on where you get them. So what I like to do, so when this is still on, let me get this on the cording maker here. If it'll go, it's pretty tight. Okay. So when this is on the cording maker like this, and you've already gotten to this point where you've twisted it and you've twisted it and you've twisted it, then you pull it off the hook and you're still holding that tension. And what I do is I actually, while I'm holding this tension, and it's really helpful if you have an extra pair of hands here, so pretend this still has tension on it, I will actually twist this further. I will continue twisting even after the cord is off of the hook. And you can even see that even right now, because I'm holding it, that's getting even tighter. So, and then I will tie off the top, and then I will release it from the hook. So it's you put your bundle on the hook, you twist it with this little guy, you take your bundle off the hook. Typically at that point, you just tie it off and you remove the cording maker. But instead of doing that, I like to give it extra twists. And I just find that while those twists, even if I make it really, really tight, those twists do tend to ease out a little bit, but that really helps me to kind of consistently have a nice, well twisted cord. I had somebody said, boy, do I have it in my notes here. Somebody said, I usually just end up getting the twist. Oh, I think it was Kathy. She said, I usually just end up twisting it, continuing to fix that twist as I pin my cord down. And what she meant was that, let me see if I've got, what she meant was that if you had a loose cord, as she goes to pin this to the ledge of her ornament sandwich, she's twisting it, pinning, twisting it and pinning, and she's actually getting a tighter cord that way. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is brilliant. So fabulous, fabulous tip there, Kathy. I think it was Kathy. So yeah, I just thought that was such a good idea. For making cording, what thread do you recommend? DMC Pro Cotton or embroidery floss? So I used embroidery floss for the first time. Let me see if that ornament is hanging around. I don't have it here with me, but I was pleasantly surprised. So I have taught and just generally stayed away. Excuse me, we've got lots of allergies around. I was generally taught and just stayed away from anything stranded. Personally, I really love to work with DMC Pro Cotton number 5. I think Crynet number 12 is very popular. You can use, like Pepper Pot Split Silk. Anything that is made for 18 count canvas and is twisted, I have found that I really like the cording that creates. That being said, I just did do DMC stranded floss for the first time and really liked it. I think it's maybe a little bit more, I was going to say finicky to work with, but I don't even know if that's true. I really enjoyed it. I think it, obviously because of all the strands, it has the possibility to snag maybe a little bit more, but it really created a beautiful cording. So typically I do stay myself with a twist. A twist that is created for 18 count canvas. I've just found that I like the cord that thread for 18 count creates better than thread that's made for 13 count. So something like a silken ivory is really made more for like a 13 count, and this was made out of silk-made braid, makes a beautiful cord. This is for 18 count. There's also a 13 count version. So it just kind of creates a more delicate cord, and I like that. If I use Kreinik for cording, what size do you recommend? I had an ornament here. Ooh, it's not here anymore, but it was made out of Kreinik, and I think it was number 12. I believe that number 12 is generally the size that people go for. Again, I would just go for maybe one that is made for 18 count, like just on the edge of 18 count. So I wouldn't go for one of the really thin Kreiniks. I would go for one that will cover an 18 count canvas well with a single stitch, and then maybe stay away from bigger than that. But part of it is also just experimentation. I mean, yeah, I mean, especially if you have like a sale bin at your local store, like just grab some of that stuff and try it out. Try making cords out of it just to get a feel. You know, all of these sort of twist a little bit differently, and really it's just great to try it out yourself. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, like pepper pot tends to be kind of a little bit softer and a springier cord than like a DMC Pearl Cotton. DMC Pearl Cotton is really kind of my go-to. DMC Pearl Cotton number 5. Do you ever use a binding stitch or something else instead of cording? I do not, personally. I have never tried that. I would love to try rickrack. I think that would be really fun. I also really want to try beading a cord. I think that would be a blast. But I have never tried a binding stitch instead of cording. I think cording is very pretty and probably easier than a binding stitch. Okay, so how do you do a candy cord twist? This is Lexi. So a double color twist. Again, Kreinik comes with this little instructional booklet, and I do also include these instructions on how to do this in my class, the online ornament finishing class. It's pretty simple. So if you're familiar with how to create a cord, you do the math. You figure out how much thread that you're going to need for your specific ornament, and then you twist that together. You create a bundle. You cut out your thread, create a bundle, tie it off, twist that together, and create your cord. So when you are doing a candy cane cord, what you are doing, let me see, I've got a little example here, and I think what I'm going to do is actually move my notes here and flip you guys around so I can show you this on the video. Okay, so these are just a few little sort of example bundles. So what you do is, depending on the thickness of your cord, and I really like between 8 strands and like 11 strands for a 4-inch round, depending on the thread I'm using. So what you do is you cut of the first thread, you cut yourself the full length bundle that you normally would. So say for a 4-inch round, you wanted to cut 70 inches to create a, maybe 26-inch cord. You would cut of your first color 70 inches in half the amount of strands that you would you want for your final bundle, and then you do the same for your second color. So when you go to create your final bundle, you're going to take one of your colors, you're going to tie it in half like so, and create a loop like this. And then you're going to thread your second bundle through the first and then tie that off. So now, theoretically, these are very short, of course, you would have a 70-inch bundle of, I've got 4 strands here. So let's say we're making an eight strand bundle or an 8-strand cord. So I would now have 8 strands on each side. It's an 8-strand bundle at 70 inches long. When I go to twist this together, I'm going to twist, 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 and then I go to put my cording maker in the center of the twist or the twisted bundle, and I release it and it spins together. It's going to spin, this seamless join is directly in the middle, and it's going to join there and create a beautiful candy cane cord. So the twisting of the cord is exactly the same, but the setup is just a little bit differently. So hopefully that makes sense, Lexi. And also it is in here. Let me see. So in the Krynic, the instructions that come with a Krynic cording maker, they actually talk about candy cane. They talk about, so you can see their 2 thread loops interlocking, herringbone cording, and even a 4-color candy cane cording. So yeah, great little tool. And that is how you do it. Does anybody have any questions about cording before we move on? All right. So, okay, so Polly asked, said there's too much gap between the cardboard and the ornament. And I should have left you. Do you ever use drill? I have never used a drill. I've heard it's great, that it's absolutely something you can use. And I will say these little guys, they do wear out eventually. I mean, you can get a lot of cords out of these, but they do wear out eventually. And I've never used a drill, but I know a lot of people do, and it looks really like fun. It looks like a great way of doing it. Okay, so Polly asked again, she's having trouble between a gap between her ornament and cardboard. So this is really about pulling the tab tight enough. So, and this is really why I prefer to use pins over Wonder Clips. Wonder Clips are amazing. They're amazing, especially in special shape ornament finishing. When you get into, you know, tiny tabs that it's very hard to pin in place. But when you're doing like round or square ornament finishing, then I really like using pins. Now, I will put a dollop of glue down, and I will take my tab and I will really firmly pull that tab up and around. So there is no gap there. And then when I go to sink my pin, I like to put my pin into the canvas in this direction, kind of at this angle. And then I like to pull it back towards me and sink it into the board. And you can just see, let me see if I can get up close here. You can see how it's actually pulling that canvas. There's no space here. So that's one tip. If you're lacing the ornament, then you're just going to be pulling it really tight. Let me see, I have an example right here. Yeah. So you're just going to be pulling it really tight and making sure, I mean, you're not going to get, when you lace an ornament, and we're going to talk a little bit about lacing in a second, because I had a question about that as well. But yeah, it's not quite as tight as when you're gluing, because glue just really, it just binds it well. That bind is going to be lost eventually. But you know, sewing it together is going to help that. So yeah, just pull this really, really tight if you're lacing, and make sure you don't lose that tension. Even hold when you come up from your tab and you pull it. What I like to do when I'm lacing is I like to place my thumb or finger in the middle of my ornament, just holding anything that could potentially loosen. As I stretch, as I go to the next one, then I'll release it. I'll come over, I'll sew through the next tab, pull it, hold everything in place as I go to the next one. And that way I'm just kind of keeping that tension as I go. And then Polly also asked, she said she's having trouble with the ornament being too stiff to hand sew. So really, I would say two things. Make sure you're using the right needles. So I really like embroidery needles, John James embroidery needle size 7. I probably wouldn't go any smaller than this. Even this can be small sometimes, but the shaft is strong enough to go through needlepoint canvas. But it's also not so big that you unnecessarily have to sort of shove a thick needle through the canvas. Make sure your needle is sharp, and make sure that the eye isn't too big, because again, if it's this embroidery needle, the eye is about the same size as the shaft, and so if your eye is bigger in some needles, then you're going to have to give it an extra yank. The other thing I really like to use, because canvas is stiff and it can be just difficult to get that needle through, a thimble is extremely useful, and a needle gripper. So I looked around for mine, but it is lost. Joann Fabrics sells needle grippers, and they're about this big. They're about a little round. They come in different colors. I think I have dark green. But they're just essentially little rubber pads, almost very thin. And you take it and you grip your needle and you pull. And it is so helpful, because obviously the shaft of a needle is just slippery. And so that just really, really helps when you're trying to get through a bunch of canvas and you just get stuck essentially. So have that on hand, have a thimble on hand, and make sure you're using the right needle. Now, needle sizes do kind of change depending on, like when I was looking for a needle to stock in our shop and to include in our online ornament finishing class kits. I had to find a needle and found that the sizes could vary between brands. So look at size 7, look at size 8s, look at size 9s, and just kind of see if you can find a needle that's about this size. Okay. So Lauren said, I'd love to learn how to finish without using glue. Do you teach a class like that? So Lauren, I think you're in my online ornament finishing class, and how to lace an ornament is in the bonus section. So I actually show you how to do this. What kind of board do you use? Okay, great. We are going to get into boards. I have a bunch of board questions in just a second. Yeah, I show you how to do this in the video, step by step, but it's actually very easy. I'm so sorry, guys. My phone is just going off like crazy. That's my text in the background. I have a bunch of sisters who also needlepoint, but text each other very regularly. So essentially, it's actually much easier than it looks. It looks very pretty and kind of complicated, but it's not. So what you do is you tie off in one of your tabs, and your tabs are going to look like this, and you're going to have pinned it to the board already. And then you're going to take your needle and a thick thread. So this is actually doubled up, maybe even tripled. No, I think I just doubled this. Sew all thread, but I would also recommend having a thicker thread to work with, like a heavy duty thread, so it doesn't snap on you. So you're going to tie it off in your first tab, and then you're just going to work your way around the ornament. So you're going to start here, and then you're going to come directly across. You're going to place your needle from bottom up through the tab, and then you're going to go back to the tab that is directly next to the first tab, and then you're going to go the opposite direction all the way across, up through the tab, pull tight, and you're literally just making this crisscross motion, pulling tabs, going through the middle of tabs back and forth. Make sure you don't get too close to the edge, because you can actually just pull that canvas apart. So yeah, you just go back and forth, and it creates this really sort of attractive pattern in the center. So that is called lacing, and it is a great technique. and you don't have to use any glue in your ornament doing that. Now, if you are going to use glue, I've used tacky glue for years, but I also started carrying this museum quality permanent glue, and I really like this. I feel very comfortable using this in my own needlework. And so if you do want to try glue out, maybe go for something like this. Okay. Lauren also asks, how do I finish oddly shaped ornaments? And let me see, I think I maybe had another, did I have another question about that too? Maybe not. Okay. So it is essentially, well, I teach a whole class, a special shape ornament finishing class on just this. It is essentially a combination of square and round ornament finishing. That's how I like to think of it. So, you know, you treat square finishing and round finishing differently. And when you have a special shape, you look at that shape, and this is actually the piece I use in the class. I'm so sorry, I'm caught by the comments. More detail on your new favorite glue. If you go to my website, what is it? Neutral pH is Linico. If you go to my website, we actually have it listed. You can get a nice clear image of it there under ornament finishing supplies. So I think it's Linico neutral pH adhesive. Yeah. So yeah, I use this ornament as an example, as the example in the class, because it's such an obvious, if I flip it over especially, it's such an obvious combo of square and then round, like a real round circle right here, and then curved edges. And so it's really combining sort of those two techniques, square and ornament finishing techniques, and essentially the tab plans. The main difference aside from that between sort of round and square versus special shaped ornaments is that you need to create a special shaped board, and excuse me, you need to create a tab plan, or I highly recommend creating a tab plan. And if you have a point, that's its own whole thing. And I developed a whole technique around points, but if you're kind of sticking with more like, you know, sort of softer shapes, if you would, like that, then really I think the most challenging, or the different part about special shape ornament finishing is, you know, figuring out how to create your board. And I really like to make photocopies of my canvas, and then I use those photocopies to draw out a board and trace and use that as a template, and kind of go from there essentially. So really just look at your ornament, say which areas are circular, which areas are square. We deal with squares and their corners differently than we do with circles, and kind of identify those two, and then combine them into the special shape ornament. Then make a photocopy of your ornament and use that to as a template to create your board. You will need to make sure that you scan it and then print it at the right size, so you can use that as a template, and it ends up being the right size for your piece. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling here, but hopefully that kind of makes sense, or at least points out some of the differences. And yeah, let me know if you have any more questions about that, because it's really fun to do special shapes. I've also had some questions about, let me see, crickets. I think we are going to get into special shapes a few more questions down. So I'll move on for now, and we'll come back to this. Lauren also said, what fabrics work best for backs? So this is really fun. I've pulled a few here. I would just generally avoid anything that's stretchy. So here is a silk that I picked up at just a fabric store. It's just really, really pretty. It's pretty thin, so it's nice. It's very gluable. I love Liberty of London Tana lawn. It's just, the prints are beautiful. You can see it in the back here, and just like how soft and how well they can work with just very feminine stitching. Now, I found from some students actually, and my own experience, that what you can end up having is, if you have a thin fabric like Tana lawn, it's a very sort of delicate fabric, is that when you go to wrap this around the backside of your board, it ends up being smaller than the front side because canvas is quite thick and you're wrapping them both around the same size board. So what I have started recommending, and I actually have a blog post on this, is that you back your Liberty of London or anything that's a very thin fabric like this with interfacing. So this is craft weight interfacing, and it ends up looking like this. It's a little bit more the same thickness as a canvas, and that way you don't get that size discrepancy between the front and the back of your ornament. But that's a really, really lovely choice. We do carry this on the website. I love velvet. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. Something like this would be really good to also add an interfacing to, just because it's kind of slippery. Maybe a lightweight interfacing, because you're not necessarily trying to add bulk. But this is, yeah, a really just beautiful option. Again, it's not stretchy. We also hand dye, my amazing mom hand dyes a line of cotton velveteens that we carry on the website. And I really, this is just really lovely to work with. So this is probably my go-to. Another go-to is, let me see, like a quilting cotton weight. So quilting cotton is so much fun because if you are a crafter and you're like not aware of the quilting industry, oh my goodness, it's just, I love quilting, and it's this whole new world of amazing patterns and beautiful fabrics that you can use for the back of your ornaments and in your needlepoint finishing. So quilting cotton weight, it's just a really nice weight. Let me see if I have another example around. I think this might be it. But just beautiful, beautiful patterns. It's not that thin. You maybe want to add interfacing to it sometimes, like off the top of my head, Arcularly Fabrics tend to be, that's a brand of fabric, and they tend to be a little bit thinner. But generally speaking, this is what I include in the online ornament finishing class kit. That's what you work with your first time. It's easy to use, very pretty, comes in a million different patterns. So those are kind of my go-tos. I would love to get into working with more wool. I have used wool before, and it's just, it can be really beautiful. In fact, I would even, I even sometimes go to a thrift store, and they're just beautiful skirts from the 60s, 50s, 70s, plaids in the funnest colors. I will totally just be looking at thrift stores for beautiful fabrics to work with, beautiful wools to work with, woven wools. You can also try those out as well. So, all right, let me see my next question here. Okay, so Becky would like to know how to finish a square ornament, and Pam says, how do you reduce bulk at the corner of rectangular ornaments without getting those wild shortcut canvas threads? And I think these are kind of similar questions. Again, I do teach the whole process of finishing a square ornament in my online ornament finishing class. The biggest difference between a round ornament, and this is a kind of, these are both example round and square ornaments cut out. So this would be the stitch area here, and this is the tabs and the area that would wrap around the board. So the biggest difference is the corners and how you deal with the corners. Essentially, what you want to create is sort of a modified mitered corner. So you can look up mitered corners and you can see them in sewing and in woodwork, but it's essentially that when you go to wrap this around the backside of your board, you get this nice join in the center. Now, my join is never always like dead on. I do overlap. But what Pam is talking about is, you can see when you actually do that, you get these little crazy canvas ends because you're cutting pretty close to the stitching here to reduce that bulk. So what I suggest doing is definitely leaving, and you can see here, you know, 1 to 2 canvas, or really actually 2 to 3 canvas threads in between the corner of your stitching and this edge. We're not going all the way up. And I want to say that looks like about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, probably closer to 1/8 of an inch here. So then what I like to do is I like to put a dab of glue right at this corner. And when I go to wrap this around, you're just using that glue to kind of smooth that down. And that just kind of keeps everything really securely. Again, I know some people don't love using glue. To me, if it's museum quality or even tacky glue, it just really doesn't bother me. The issue with glue is that eventually glue loses its bind. So it's less, to me, it's less an issue of like it somehow eating away the needlepoint. I think this was generally a concern, you know, back when glues were made differently than they are now. I think there was maybe sugar in the glue, and that would eventually eat your needlework. But the bigger issue is that it will lose its bind after, you know, a certain amount of years. Now we're talking quite a few years, but still, if you don't, you know, in 50 or 30 years, you don't want to be gluing stuff back together, then you always want to sew and reinforce your gluing with sewing, which we do. What we're doing is we're really just, when we glue something down, we're getting it around that board, like so. And then we're sewing that back and that front together. So, you know, it's not, the glue is not the only thing holding it together, if that makes sense. Oops, there goes my light. Okay, so let me see if I answered that question. Yeah, I think that is the end of that section. Let me flip you guys back up and turn off my lights here. Hopefully I don't need to keep using that. Okay, let me see. So we have a question here. Does the back of the ornament need to be smaller than the front? I have trouble matching the cookies up. Typically, so I would say no, it should not be smaller. Sometimes people make it bigger so that when you add the cording onto it, the cording actually sits to the front and shows more. And that's a really sweet look. I have always just made the back and the front match. So again, you might be having trouble with that because you might have the canvas could be a lot thicker than the fabric you're wrapping around your boards. So you might want to check that out. Okay. Let me just see what I have already covered. All right, so I think this is where we want to get into mat board. Mary, Caroline, and Elizabeth all asked, what is the best mat board to use? What kind do you use? Caroline is struggling to find it thin enough. And where do you get it online? And then what is the best way to cut mat board and how do you cut it? Mary said, I'm struggling with the whole process and was just about to sell all the equipment I bought, so this will be helpful. Okay, so first of all, don't do it. You can absolutely do ornament finishing, Mary. And then I had another note on mat board from Tina, who said, thank you so much for doing these. My biggest struggle is getting the backing board cut well and accurately. When I used your amazingly perfect boards, it was a dream. I found when I did mine, I was very frustrated getting the edges to wrap smoothly around, etc. The cording helped cover it, but I hate knowing it was a mess underneath. Tips on cutting, angle of the edge, investing in a Cricut would be very helpful for me. Round, rectangular, and specialty cut. But she said I was still able to finish all my ornaments for Christmas and I think they look amazing. Also, they were exactly the fabric and trim that I wanted. And I love that. I think she said, thank you for teaching this in a way that is easy to follow and for being very available for guidance. How sad it would be if I had to wait a year to get my ornaments back from the finisher. And I love that because that is exactly the reasons I love to do ornament finishing myself, especially because I get to choose my own trims and I get to choose my own backing fabric. And I love to tell people, you know, I had a student who said they were using, I think it was their grandma's skirt or a dress or something that was a really wonderful family heirloom, their grandmother something, to back all her grandkids ornaments that year. And I absolutely love that. I have my grandma's wedding dress. I have just some really special pieces that I'm like, I could, you know, just add so much more meaning and creativity to my piece by doing this myself. So I just absolutely love this. Diddle on all that praise. I was able to give lots more this year. It was super special. Oh, I'm so glad. That's so wonderful. That is just the best to hear as someone who loves ornament fishing and loves to share it. So thank you. So tons of mat board questions, which is really fun. So first of all, you want to get acid-free 4-ply mat board. Now, if you have watched my free video, then I use foam board. And I've just found, and I'm going to preface this by saying ornament finishing is a personal process. You are going to find what works for you and what does not work for you. So when I began with the mat board, I loved, this was done, I'm sorry, using foam board. This was done using foam board. It's a lot thicker. It's kind of chubby and fun, and I love the feel of it. It was very difficult to sew together. When I switched to mat board, 4-ply, specifically 4-ply mat board, I was a little bit disappointed. I loved how thick and wonderful this was, but I wanted something easier to work with, and I felt like the mat board was just a little thin. Now, I don't think that anymore, but, and especially because you can add, you know, extra batting in there to make it a little chubbier. But I thought, you know what, it's way better to have a finished ornament than a stack of ornaments waiting to be finished, because I'm too scared to sew together the very thick foam board pieces, and I was just avoiding it. So all that to say, all of these materials are interchangeable. You can find a process that works for you and a look that you really love and that works for you. So if you watch my old video, I am using foam board instead of mat board. Mat board's easier to cut, it's thinner, it's easier to sew together. So I would absolutely go for the 4-ply acid-free mat board. I used to get it at Hobby Lobby. If you go to the art section, then you can find it. I'm trying to think. You can find it. There's slots with big boards. It's about a 36 by like 40, maybe 42 piece of board. It's very big, so you're gonna have to cut it down. The other thing that I would do is look at Dick Blick. So again, if you're going 4-ply is the thickness or the the thickness of the board itself. So it's about a 1/16 of an inch, and then get it acid free. Now we do sell these boards. Because there was just really nothing out there, and when I was teaching ornament finishing, you know, I was teaching everybody how to cut out their own board, and it's an amazing skill to have. Like I would absolutely, you know, learn how to do that. We decided we started having these manufactured. These are 4-ply again, so you can kind of see that width there. These are acid and lignin free, and we sell them in the round shape, the square shape. We sell them in a couple special shapes or an egg shape, and then in smaller boards, so you don't have to buy a massive board. But you can also get a bigger board from Hobby Lobby. I think you can get maybe like a slightly smaller board, maybe something like 18 inches, or look at Dick Blick. I've seen it on Dick Blick Art Supply as well. But again, 4-ply, acid free, and you should be good to go. Online, check Hobby Lobby, check Dick Blick Art Supply. Let me see. Yeah. So getting the backing board cut well and accurately. Yeah, so I will say that I have a cameo silhouette that has been sitting in a box for a year. I think it's because I still want to figure it out. I found it a little bit challenging, and I love the control of using my X-Acto knife. So it's still something I'm going to conquer. But I just really find that an X-Acto knife and a pair of scissors do work really well. So my biggest tips, and Tina, you are in my class, so there's a bonus video on how to do this. So go to the bonus section and actually watch the whole process here that I'm about to describe to you. So if you want to see it kind of real time, but I would say the biggest thing is do not try to cut out the shape all at once. So especially when you're using an X-Acto knife, the first time you go around, and this is especially true for special shapes, you're pressing in, right? But you're not trying to get all the way through that mat board. You're essentially just scoring that outline. And then once you score it, then you can go back, but you're going to go back maybe 4 different times. So just take your time. Don't be in a rush. Just, just work at that shape. And yeah, I think that trying to get your X-Acto knife all the way through on the first go is just very difficult, and you're going to probably end up hurting your hands and maybe getting cut. Like, it's just not that safe. And it's just the shape itself isn't going to look as good. Similarly, when you go to cut out, and why don't I flip you guys around also to show you this portion. When you go to cut out an ornament with scissors, now I like to have my scissors, I'm going to turn off commenting for just a second so you guys can see this. Let's see. I like to have a combo of my X-Acto knife and my scissors. So let's draw around right here. Let's say we're cutting this out. Now, with a round shape, I find scissors to be easier. So a nice sharp pair of craft scissors. Now, I will go along the edge of the board. It's quite stiff. Maybe about that far. And that's about as far as I can go without it getting uncomfortable because of this piece. So I'm literally just going to cut that right off. And then I'm going to keep going. So I'm doing this in stages. I'm not doing it in one go. Sometimes you might have to come over here, and actually if this were a real ornament, I would get rid of this big old piece because it's totally in the way. We're just going to continue going around like so. When you do square, well, actually, you know what? Let me finish with rounds here. So once you have your round cut out your second round, and I show you this in the video in the bonus section as well of the class. But if you gently turn your round like so, you can actually see. Let me show it here, actually. Now, this is a perfect round, but if you hold up your round and turn it in front of your face, you're going to see where it's not a perfect circle and you've got bulges. Now, I will say ornament finishing is not a perfect craft because it's handmade. It's not going to be perfect. Your circle is not going to be perfect. What you want is to have the circle, the front and the back circle, match each other. So once you've cut out 2 circles, put them together. And again, these are the pre-cut ones that we sell. So you're not going to really, it's not a great example here, but let's say, let me make one. Let's say one of the ornaments is a little bit bigger on the right side. And you can see that when I line them up perfectly, I've got a little bit of an overlap here, or an underhang. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go and I'm going to cut that. I'm going to cut that off. And then I'm going to flip it over to the other side. And I'm going to do the same here. And you'll see like maybe there's going to be a little bulge right here. And you're really just taking off slivers. But what you're doing is when you wrap the back and the front together, or I'm sorry, the back and the front with your canvas and your backing fabric, and you bring them together, then they're going to match up perfectly. Even if they're not a perfect circle, you're not going to have, the front of your ornament that's kind of bulging out over here and creating a weird shape, on the back, and it's not coming together as well, if that makes sense. So One thing you will want to do once you're done sort of trimming and adjusting and making sure that those circles are the exact same shape, do mark which way is up. So just put a little mark on both sides. That way, when you go to wrap it around and you join them together, they will be perfectly matching up essentially. So those are my best tips on cutting out a circular shape and getting that to match up. When it comes to squares and to special shapes, I like to use an X-Acto knife. So typically your board will have a straight edge. The straight edge is the edge that is cut by the manufacturer. It's the edge of the board. And what you want to do is you want a ruler like this. And you want to line up your ruler with the edge of each edge here. So even if, let's say we wanted this to be, 4 inches across, which is right here, I would grab this. I would say, here's my 4-inch mark. And then I would line up this edge with the top straight edge. And that way, this is a perfect angle, or it's a perfectly square. I'm not going to actually cut this because I don't have a cutting mat underneath me, but you can see that that scored edge is perfectly square to that top edge. And that way, you're just going to get a really great, clean, sort of perfect rectangle or square or whatever, dimensions you want it to be. With special shapes, this is a little painted pony angel. Again, you're going to be using a combination of maybe your scissors and your X-Acto knife. So on any straight edge, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line it up and I'm going to use that ruler to get a nice straight edge. If you go at it with scissors or if you go at it with just this, you're just not going to get it as straight as if you were using a ruler. You also want to take a look at the areas that are straight and square to each other within the board and line those up. So you can see I would want to make sure these are lined up and that that's square with this up here, the top of the head. So you can see that this line is here and this line is here, and those are parallel to each other. This is especially so if we had a straight edge that is running the opposite. And then use your scissors, maybe score these with your X-Acto knife, but that's going to be kind of tricky. And one way you're going to do that is don't feel like you have to do this in a simultaneous motion. Make little cuts as you go to make it a little bit easier. Once you score it, it might be easier to go back with your scissors and cut out. And also don't feel like you have to cut it out this direction. If you have to make the first cut here and then turn it and make the cut going back to get that angle, do that too. So just take your time and just see which ways are easiest for you, which tools work best for you. When you're done, put your top and your front again together, just like you would with a circle, just like you would with a rectangle, and make sure that they match perfectly. And again, it matters less that this is a perfect straight line as it matches the back, right? So that when we bring the back and the front of the ornament together, they match up. Okay, let me see if I missed any tips there. I think that might be all of them. Okay, let me turn commenting back on. Let me check out your questions. Okay, I think we got those. So that is all my pre-submitted questions. Does anybody have any other questions? I think I saw a few in there that maybe I missed as we went along. So if you guys want to resubmit those. Yeah, thanks for, will you post this? I missed some of it. Absolutely. So I'm going to post it to my Instagram, but hopefully also I will get it on my YouTube as well. How do you get the outline for the shape? Yeah, so great question. So I would say that for a circular shape, now I have templates. So a For a typical 4-inch round, you're going to want to be a 1/4 inch smaller. And so you'll be looking for a circular, like a printout that is a circular 3 3/4 inch printout. And I have that in my class. I also think I might have it somewhere else. Shoot me an email via the website or even on my Instagram, and I have those templates that I'm happy to send to you. They're not a part of the paid class, so absolutely. Some templates, like you can also use a cup, something with a perfectly round. It can be a little bit trickier getting it exactly the right size. When it comes to a special shape, that is, let me see. Thanks so much for the details on the mat board. Already ordered some. Great. Oh, I should say, if you like also our perfectly round mat board. So if you have one of these that you have ordered from us or you've taken the class, you could actually use this as your template. Just put this down on a board and trace around it. So maybe save one to use as a template because it's a perfect size. When it comes to special shapes, that is a process of photocopying your canvas and then using your ruler to draw into the shape 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then you're going to cut that out and you're going to use that photocopy with the lines to trace then onto your board and then cut it out. Hopefully that makes sense. You're a gracious and encouraging teacher. Thank you. That's very kind. Can you share your website? Yes, it is www.abigailcecile.com. So if you look at my handle, that is the spelling right there, but without the little underscore. Let me see. Thank you for this. I may actually now try to finish an ornament. Good. Yes. Okay. So if you're going to try your first ornament, if you're a little bit like, oh, I'm kind of nervous about this, then use a blank canvas first. It's how I first tried ornament finishing, and it was a great way to go. But I do have a lot of students who jump right in with a real ornament. So either way is awesome, but that makes me so happy. Thanks so much for the details on the backboard. Already ordered some. Great. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, of course. Thank you. Hugely helpful that it takes time for everyone. I thought I was missing something. Recutting board. No, yeah, and just yeah, stick to it. Like, it's, again, there's kind of no really right or wrong way. I really just really want to encourage students and just anyone who's trying ornament finishing that it is a handmade process. It does take time. It gets faster. Like it used to take me a while to sew the ornament together. It absolutely gets way faster. It gets way easier, but also it's never going to be perfect. So some of my favorite ornaments, and I've got it here. Or do I? Maybe I don't have it here. One of my absolutely favorite ornaments was one of my first ornaments. And if you look up close at it, it is like, it's a mess. It's a good old mess. I've got, I have, paint. I've done lots of painting here. You can see the canvas. I've glued the cording on. You can probably see stitches in the back. I hang it on my doorknob. It's like my favorite ornament. I hang it on my doorknob. I never notice any of that. So just really give yourself grace and it's a handmade product. Also, don't think that professional finishers are perfect. They do incredible, beautiful work. But I had a student who said she had opened a needlepoint shop and she had this great ornament that she showed her customers all the time. And eventually she just started to notice that, oh, like I see some stitches here. I see some stitches there. I see some things here. It is a handmade piece that is made with love. It's not perfect. So just really, yeah, be okay with that. And I'm preaching to myself as much as to anyone. Thank you so much for the extremely helpful Q&A. Looking forward to your online ornament fishing class. You were so encouraging. Thank you. That is very kind. How do you sew the ornament sides together? So you are going to use a whip stitch. Personally, I really like a whip stitch for sewing the back and the front together. Yeah. Let me see what else we got here. Oh, I did have a question I think I missed from Kathy. Let me see. And guys, if I missed any of your questions, do let me know and I will send you an email. Kathy asked, and this is such a good question. She says, any tips on making the twisted loop at the loop bottom not have a gap? That would be excellent. My personal challenge going forward. So such a good question. So essentially, this is a little example ornament here. Essentially, this gap at the top, and Kathy, I think this is what you were asking. So let me know if this is not, and I'll answer you in an email. But essentially, you can make this gap as big or as small as you want. Now, what I teach is in my class is that we're going to place a pin at the top of your ornament. So that is your center point. I like to call it a center point. Now, right to the, let me see, left of the center point, you're going to put another pin, like so, okay? And that is where your cording goes up and starts to create your loop. Then it's going to come back down and enter your ornament from behind. So where your cord goes down into the ornament and goes up into the loop in relation to your center point, that determines how wide or narrow that gap is. So let's say, and I might have a little trouble because this is already glued, but let's say we wanted our ornament or our loop to go up 1/4 inch to the, what is that, the left of the ornament, and go down 1/4 inch to the right, I'm sorry, of the center point. That would give us like a 1/2 inch gap here. But if we want it to go down practically behind the center point and go up, you know, we can really push that in there, you know, right next to that center point, then we have a very narrow gap. So you can kind of control it that way. Just think about the center point, think about where it's going up, where it's going back down, and how tightly you space those. Yeah. Where do we sign up for your class? Oh yeah, it is on my website, www.abigailcecile.com. And you can follow also the link in my profile. I think that will take you to my newest kit, but if you click on classes, then you can go and you can see my class offers any in-person classes. I would love to. I'm not at that point yet where I can do in-person classes locally. But I did just build a studio, so it's something that is hopefully going to happen in the future. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody so much for being here. This was a pleasure. I always love talking ornament finishing, and we will absolutely do this again. So do join next time. All right, thank you everybody so much and have a lovely night.